Hello! Our story begins inside the Jedi Temple, where Jedi Knight Qui Gon Jinn took upon himself a Padawan. Though the Padawan he took on was several years younger than the original student he had his eyes on. Qui Gon, several years before, had his sights on taking on Obi Wan Kenobi as his apprentice, though one of the High Council members requested to take the student on instead, and Master Qui Gon accepted it. Master Plo Koon became the teacher of Obi Wan Kenobi, and the reason for choosing Obi Wan is because Plo Koon saw the raw potential in Obi-Wan. Plo knew that Kenobi was one of many Jedi who had great talents, but they never had a chance to exploit their talents because the way they were just trained as a child. Obi-Wan had a lot of potential for greatness, and the High Council Master believed he could help Kenobi reach that sooner than later. Qui-Gon was a little taken aback afterwards, and he had a lack of interest in teaching a Padawan for an extended period of time, though about 7 years later Qui-Gon Jinn came across a youngling by the name of Asajj Ventress. She was a young girl, originally from Dathomir, who was exceptionally talented. She was almost rejected from the Jedi Temple, but she was accepted at the late age of 6 years old. Qui-Gon noticed that Asajj had a great talent in the Force, similar to the talent of Kenobi, though there was something more about her that interested him. Qui-Gon, having been instructed by Master Dooku, had a skewed vision of the Jedi Order. Qui-Gon saw the Jedi for what they really were, and so did Asajj. It made her almost the perfect match for Qui-Gon Jinn, though the only difficulty was her anger. It's something that a lot of future teachers were warned about. Asajj had a lot of anger within her, tons more hatred and lack of patience, and that was a little bit too much for her to handle by herself. She hardly passed her trials to become a Padawan to begin with, but when she did, she was one of the last Jedi selected, which she was picked by Qui-Gon. Everyone was surprised because Jedi becoming masters that were originally knights were told to avoid picking Asajj Ventress. There was a reason for it, which was the Jedi believed that an experienced master should take on such a troublesome student such as Asajj, but that wasn't the case with Qui-Gon. He was inexperienced and he was perfectly fine with taking on Asajj. Asajj herself was surprised when she was taken by an inexperienced Jedi Master, but Qui-Gon was already on the older side, so by no means was Qui-Gon inexperienced. Their bond was really strong immediately. Qui-Gon's more lenient stance in the Jedi Code and wider vision of the Force would match the rambunctious nature of Asajj Ventress. Asajj had a rough childhood, and the way that her master accepted her changed her entire stance on the Jedi themselves. Having been a slave, having been forced away from her home on Dathomir left a permanent stain on her heart, and it was filled with the compassion given to her by her new master. Qui-Gon understood that to be a good Jedi required the full understanding of the Force, and the full range of emotions required to grasp it in all of its glory. Asajj adopted Form 2 in contrast to what her master used, which was for Qui-Gon Form 4. This collaboration of lightsaber skills worked really well in their dynamic, especially as Asajj, a year into training, would take on another lightsaber to complement her style. Something Qui-Gon realized early on about his training with Ventress was how talented she really was. It was something that she was never given enough credit for. Her talents were extraordinary, and no one ever noticed it, or they just chose to ignore it for what the Jedi would call glaring issues. Qui-Gon didn't care about her past, he cared about her future, and the type of Jedi she would become if she embraced what surrounded her, if she embraced the pathway of the Force, and if she too embraced her master's teachings, which Asajj did a lot with Qui-Gon. Being here inside the temple was much safer than being where she was originally supposed to be. When Asajj was found on Ratak by a Jedi Knight, she was freed from her band of pirates. Narek, which was the Jedi Knight who found her, nearly kept Asajj on the planet, but he knew that keeping her in an unsafe place in the galaxy was a bad idea. Narek would have raised her, though truthfully, the only thing that made him go to the temple was what he thought had her best intentions in mind. He wasn't a Jedi Master, so why should he task himself for something he was not ready to do yet? He knew it was a risk bringing Ventress to the temple, but when she was accepted, he knew he made the right decision. Qui-Gon and Asajj had no issue getting along. There were of course hiccups along the way, because Qui-Gon was a Jedi Master, and a new one at that, but he did everything within his power to make sure that his student was being trained adequately. The largest hiccups that came between the two of them were as simple as listening problems. Sometimes Asajj just didn't like to listen to Qui-Gon, and typically that would restart a lesson, and it would resolve itself without much difficulty, which for Qui-Gon was a great joy about training Asajj. Something Qui-Gon would have never foresaw was how great at dueling his young student would become. Asajj was incredibly talented, and when she got her second lightsaber, she became a blur with the blade, an unstoppable force if you will. Though there was so much more than lightsaber dueling with Asajj. Her ability to use the force was quite admirable, and she exhibited those abilities on missions with her master. However, she did show a desire to use rage against pirates and take her anger out on individuals that showed a tendency to be either pirates or slavers. Qui Gon told Ventress that she needed to rein herself back in when she was dealing with pirates because the way she was treating them wasn't on par with even his interpretation of the Jedi way. Asajj understood, and for several years she would work on refining those skills and making sure she didn't go overboard. Their dynamic worked well because both were so rebellious in their own ways, and on top of that, Qui Gon's patience allowed Asajj to make those mistakes that she would have made regardless of who taught her. The main difference was how Qui Gon responded when she made those mistakes. When Asajj was 18 and her master was 48, the two of them were dispatched to Naboo, which led the two Jedi from Naboo to the planet of Tatooine. When they were on Tatooine, Qui Gon told his apprentice to stay on the ship, which was perfectly fine, but that changed when she learned about the slave child. Asajj, having been a slave for the first 6 years of her life, essentially hadn't yet come to terms with those demons that lived within her, and so, in the middle of the night, when everyone on board the Queen's starship was sleeping, she escaped and searched Watto's shop. She would wait in the shop until he showed up in the morning, and when he arrived, she gutted him. It was the first true act of violence Asajj had ever really shown, though she made a point to use a weapon that couldn't be identified with any Jedi on the planet, especially considering Qui-Gon and Asajj Ventress weren't the only Jedi here. Jedi Master Quinlan Vos was also here, and he was on a covert op, and he wasn't exactly talking to either Jedi. After Ventress' cold-blooded murder, she would return to the ship. In the morning when Qui-Gon went back to try and make a bargain for Skywalker, he was nowhere to be seen. When Qui-Gon went to search for the Toydarian, he found him slain in his own workshop, in which case Qui-Gon did the responsible thing, informing the proper authorities, taking Skywalker out of the race, stealing the appropriate parts, and telling Shmi that she was now free. However, Shmi would likely not remain free forever, so Qui-Gon told Shmi to come back with them to Coruscant, because to the way Watto was murdered, Qui-Gon didn't even think about the possibility of it being a student. There just wasn't much of a case for him to figure out that she was a killer. For her to be the assailant in the murder just didn't make sense. So, when he got everything he needed, they began their return to Coruscant. Being in space was weird for the child and mother, considering neither of them had ever been in space before. Though Asajj was as comforting as she could be with either of them, and so was Padme. The undercover queen told Shmi that if they could get her a place to stay on Coruscant, they would do so, and they'd be happy to do that for her if they could, though if they couldn't, then they would do one for her on Naboo. It was really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, especially considering Asajj hadn't realized there were so many slavers that could have been murdered on Tatooine. It wasn't exactly all Ventress' fault. Yes, it was her fault for killing the Toydarian, but the urge to do it, aside from her past traumas, sat naturally within her because she was from Dathomir. It's why the Jedi Temple didn't typically have former Night Sisters or Night Brothers within their ranks. Mother Talzin and Old Daka kept a tight grip on the planet, and the dark side was very strong with all of its members. Though that wasn't because the Night Sisters were evil, it was only because Mother Talzin and Old Daka used Force magic, and Force magic allowed them to use the dark side and the light side. Also, especially for Night Sisters, they tended to be more violent, and they used the dark side a little bit more. It's also not because they were evil, but because they were the unchallenged clan on Dathomir. Night Sisters ruled, and they made their show of force whenever they wanted to. It was how their society operated, and for Night Sisters in the temple, they typically displayed the same natural aggression. Asajj had that within her, but she didn't show it too often. Though for Asajj, there was one Jedi that she often bantered with, which was Obi Wan Kenobi. But aside from that, there wasn't much that she would do to identify her relation to her clan on Dathomir. After a series of events on Coruscant, Ventress and Qui-Gon would return to Naboo with Anakin. Shmi wasn't exactly happy with it, but she allowed it because she knew that Qui-Gon was trying to get Anakin to become a Jedi, considering he believed that Skywalker was his prophesized Chosen One. During their return to Naboo, Qui-Gon and Asajj would come face to face for the first time with a Sith assassin by the name of Maul. Because they spent so little time on Tatooine, there was really never a chance for Maul to catch up to the two Jedi and find them. It was as simple as they just never met. But here they were, meeting for the first time, and the natural aggressiveness inside of Asajj boiled up. Maul was a part of the Night Brothers clan, and to Ventress, that immediately put a high target on Maul's head. Her internal biology told her that she needed to break Maul, as it was aligned with her societal way. She may have been a Jedi, but some things would always have to be this way, and she was going to make Maul suffer. Their fight began, and it was very flashy. Maul was a little older than Ventress by about 4 years, and he moved like a younger man. Qui Gon was a very talented duelist, especially having been trained by Master Dooku, though Maul was making both of these Jedi work their hardest to just survive. Maul was trained by perhaps one of the only duelists in the entire galaxy that could hold a threat to Dooku himself. Sidious was an incredible duelist, maybe a little less talented than Dooku, but nonetheless incredible. Maul wore those talents on his shoulders, and against an older man like Qui Gon, who in reality wasn't that old, he made him look really bad. Maul was able to separate himself from the younger opponent and kill Qui Gon. In this moment, he waited for Asajj to come through a barrier to see if he could kill her as well. But Asajj wasn't going to let that happen, and so when the barrier opened up, she flipped out, jarring Maul from his stance and pushing him off balance. Qui-Gon was on the ground staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of lightsaber combat, hoping that his young student would be able to best the Zabrak assassin. Maul tried to get to his advantage, but he couldn't. The nightsister Jedi harnessed the light of her master and the darkness of her tribe to throw Maul against the wall, and in the same way that she did to Watto, she gutted the Sith assassin before removing his head, just to make sure that he didn't survive. It was a little over the top, but definitely not the Jedi way. But she was just ensuring that the man who killed her master was dead. She turned over, ran to her master's side, and found him to still be alive, barely. Asajj tried to help him, but he was just gone. He was coughing heavily, and he asked that she promised to train Anakin. Qui-Gon made a case for Asajj to be ready to pass the trials previously when he introduced Skywalker to the High Council, though they originally thought her to be too young. Though it wasn't out of the question. There had been multiple knights that were younger than her, one of the most notable ones being 16, though that was generations before her. Regardless, Asajj promised her master that she would train the boy, and slowly Qui-Gon faded away in her student's arms. Above Naboo, Anakin Skywalker was the integral piece to destroying the remnants of the Lucrehulk orbiting the system. The Jedi would come to Naboo to have the Jedi Master burned and allow him to become one with the Force. Asajj would become a Jedi Knight, but she would argue with the Grand Master about becoming Anakin's teacher. Yoda was very hesitant with the idea because Ventress is only 18. She'd be the youngest Jedi Master the Order ever had. Taking on a student at such an age would be a difficult task for her to deal with, but it was necessary for her in her mind that she do this. Yoda caved in, knowing that with a student trained by Qui-Gon, she would only do it regardless of the Council's decision. So, in his mind, it might as well happen with the Council's permission. Yoda allowed Asajj to train Anakin, and she would become the youngest Jedi Master in the history of the Jedi Order. It was almost necessary for her to consult Jaqar Sanu, which is what she did when she returned to the Jedi Temple. Though at the same time she confronted Jaqar Sanu, there were rumors circulating around the temple about the disappearance of Jedi Master Dooku and former High Council member Yaddle. They hadn't been seen, and so one was to assume that they had betrayed the Order and abandoned it. Time would tell what happened to the two of them. But for now, Asajj was learning as much as she could about being a Jedi Master. It wouldn't be an easy task for her, considering she was only 18. But for her master, she was willing to make the sacrifice to be the best master she could possibly become for young Skywalker. She did have time to learn, considering Anakin was about 9 and almost turning 10. She had almost 3 years to fully immerse herself in the ways of a Jedi Master. Though as she began to delve into it, she realized that what she needed to be for Anakin Skywalker was simply the best version of herself. She didn't need to be anyone other than that, because if she pretended to be a Jedi Master that the Jedi wanted her to be, then she would fail Anakin. But if she took the role on the same way that Qui-Gon would've, then Anakin could succeed, and very likely would succeed. The reason this is because Anakin was just like her, accepted into the Order at a late age, lived the life of a slave, and had the full range of human emotions, and this pull to the dark side that she too had. Asajj very well could be the perfect master for Anakin Skywalker if she trusted herself, rather than to force herself to be controlled by the will of the Order or the Code. So Asajj did everything she could in those years to mentally prepare herself for what in her mind would likely become a mini-me. Anakin would likely take after her in many ways, though there was a positivity here for Anakin Skywalker. Because Asajj murdered Watto, Shmi was able to live here on Coruscant thanks to Padme Amidala, and while Padme was paying Shmi's rent, Shmi was able to get herself a job that would pay for it instead, which meant that the royal queen was no longer in need to pay for the apartment. But Padme felt almost obligated because she thought that slavery shouldn't exist because, well, it shouldn't, and she believed paying those those payments to Shmi would begin to make things right. Anakin was unaware of these transactions, but he still found an attraction to Padme. He thought about her every day at the temple, which was positive and negative. The negative effects on Skywalker were how obsessive he became, though positively, it almost coaxed him down to be able to focus on his daily instruction. After 3 years of basic instruction, Anakin was given to Asajj Ventress. She thought she was ready, but then she very quickly realized that she had no idea what she was doing. Though this wasn't on her, it happened more frequently than many would like to admit. Many Jedi Knights, before becoming Jedi Masters, would hype themselves up to take on their first student, and then when they got their first student, it almost instantaneously went to, oh no, I messed up. It's alright. Anakin was ready to learn with his new master, and so he looked at her and waited for her instruction. Asajj told Anakin that she didn't have any instructions, she just wanted a conversation. Anakin found this odd. Most of the youngling instructors didn't care for conversation, they wanted results, and forced those results on anyone who fell behind. So this was a complete culture shock, though for Anakin, as tough as it was nice knowing that his mother was safe just a little ways away in Coruscant, not the polar opposite end of the galaxy. Asajj asked Anakin questions relating to his feelings, and this made him feel a little uneasy, as if Asajj was going to try and get him in trouble for expressing how he felt, or why he felt a certain way about certain things, but that was not the case. Asajj was just curious as to how similar they were, and they really were similar. How they felt towards the youngling instructors was just a beginning. There was so much more that they had similar between the two of them. The two of them bonded really quickly, and because of the short age gap between the two of them, which was only 9 years, Anakin saw Asajj like an older sister. But Asajj didn't exactly see it like that. While yes, there was room for that bond to flourish, she was a master, and she took that role on as seriously as she could. Being a Jedi Master was an important task, and because Anakin was the Chosen One, she needed to be at the best and at the top of her game, being remiss to mention how much pressure was on her to perform at the top of her game all the time. After their somewhat emotional conversation, Asajj told Skywalker that she would like to get to work on his lightsaber training. By this point, Obi Wan was already a Jedi Knight, and he didn't want to train any students. Kenobi was already far ahead of his training because of Plo Koon, though this wasn't a knock on any other potential candidates to have been Obi-Wan's master. Plo was just an easier teacher for Kenobi to get along with because both of them were tied to the Jedi Code. Obi-Wan was sitting in the training hall where Asajj was taking her student to train in. Both Ventress and Kenobi were close friends, and they had this weird flirtatious thing. Obi-Wan didn't mean anything by it, especially since he and Master Plo went to Mandalore a while back, and Obi-Wan met Satine, the Duchess of Mandalore. And while Obi-Wan's heart did belong to Satine, it didn't mean he didn't flirt. But that's because he was a bit of a sassy young man. Asajj was just sassy, and she too had no real interest in Kenobi. It was just one of those friendships full of teasing that if anyone else saw, they would assume that they were either together or crushing on each other. It was just a great friendship, and Asajj brought Obi-Wan here to get a second opinion on Skywalker. Obi-Wan was 7 years older than Asajj Ventress, and at this point he would have maybe more input on how to help with Skywalker. Though both of them immediately noticed how aggressive young Skywalker was. When he used a lightsaber, he was always going for the kill with each and every strike. Asajj knew that feeling from when she killed Maul, and she slowly began to etch it out of Skywalker, especially when he sparred with her. Though it was difficult, he gained power incredibly quickly, and he was always looking for victory. His desire for victory was too high in the grand scope of how he should be behaving as a Jedi, even for Asajj. She helped him with that though, pointing out his flaws without putting him down and without making him feel like she was intimidated by him, which was actually far from the truth. Asajj was very intimidated by Anakin, but this wasn't because of his sheer strength. It was how fast he grew under her that she wasn't ready for, though no Jedi, aside from a few council members, would have been able to handle the amount of which he grew. Anakin was very strong and his growth seemed to double every day. That was what was intimidating. He had no control over so much power, and it was intimidating to teach as a young teacher. Though the one thing to alleviate any of those fears over such power was Anakin as an individual. He looked up to Ventress, and he respected her a lot. He didn't want to fail her, and so he was very dedicated to listening to her directions. Their close bond continued the more they got to be around each other, and to know each other. Asajj, having toiled on the dark side before, could communicate healthily to her student how far into the darkness Anakin should go. Asajj likely being the best instructor on the usage of the dark side that wasn't Pong Krell, Mace Windu, or Quinlan Vos. Though Anakin started getting older, he would mold very nicely into what a good Jedi was supposed to be, with that Qui Gon flair to it. Asajj, while critical of the Jedi way, was never so critical that she got Anakin to resent the Jedi Code or the Order itself. She was critical in a positive demeanor, one that required Skywalker to see the Jedi with all their flaws, yes, but also see what the Jedi were and what they could become for the people of the galaxy. Asajj painted a picture in Anakin's mind, telling him that the future would be so bold that one day he would likely be at the helm of the Jedi Council, and the only one to sit there next to him would be Master Yoda or Master Plo Koon, depending on who was still alive at that time, being that they were both the eldest members in the Order. And with Anakin on said council, he would have the power to influence the direction of the Jedi Order. It's something that Anakin should never neglect about himself, but he also should never hold himself to. He was destined to be the best of the Jedi, but he should never hold himself or hold that over him, because it could very easily corrupt him. Anakin asked his master several times what he should do or what he should hold over himself, to which Asajj told him that he should always hold what he thought his best version of himself was over himself. Anakin asked how he could achieve that, to which his master always told him that he wasn't supposed to. It was a little convoluted, but it always made sense. Asajj lived her life by one moral, which was being better than she was the day before. It didn't entail doing more or learning more, it just meant going forward. Like the continuous belief that no matter how good or bad the day was, that it was still going forwards towards the most complete version of herself. Anakin understood this concept, but what about the best version of himself? And now the only thing that held him back was how little or how high he ever thought of himself. Anakin thought highly of himself to begin with, and he believed that he could be the best, and with the supportive teacher behind him, he could definitely reach that. Asajj was a great instructor because despite the hiccups she had very early on, she bonded with Skywalker unlike any other Jedi did. It was very necessary for the relationship between master and apprentice to work. The tightness of this bond was very crucial, and it also helped Anakin with addressing some of his own questions about the choices that Jedi could make. One of those choices being how Anakin felt about the former queen, now senator of Naboo. Asajj had a convoluted answer to that as well, but it was one that would suffice. She told Skywalker that he had every right to feel how he felt about her, not to mention that Padme was, well, she was Padme. But to be a Jedi required that those emotions didn't control him. Of course he could pursue it, but it might not work for a senator as well, being that politically, Jedi and senators weren't supposed to be platonic or in a relationship at that. Asajj noticed that Anakin looked upset about it, so she gave an answer that could help with this predicament, telling Anakin that her and Obi Wan were a great example. Asajj admitted that she thought Obi Wan was Coruscant's ass. However, she didn't let that beautiful beard and wit consume her. This obviously made Anakin cringe like no other, but she did have a point. Ventress's point aside of making Anakin laugh or cringe was that Asajj fancied Obi-Wan, in a way, but never let that go further than that. Sure, he was beautiful, but she enjoyed what they had. It didn't push them away from the Jedi and allowed them to fulfill those more humanistic emotions that every Jedi naturally felt. Anakin asked what she meant. Asajj tapped Anakin on the head and asked if he ever paid attention, to which she continued saying that Obi-Wan and her always flirted, no matter what they were doing, if they were eating together, if they were sparring with each other, even if they were having a touchy, more difficult conversation. It's how they worked. Even the little nicknames they had for each other were flirty, but they never crossed the line. There was a fine line and they both understood where it was. Asajj told Anakin that he didn't have to live that life with himself, a senator, or even another Jedi. It was just up to him. But it was a healthy way of showing off emotions without breaking the code, or throwing away the life they had inside the Jedi Temple. While there certainly were some mixed signals about the entire conversation, it did make sense, and Skywalker took it to heart. But this conversation, even as off the rails as it was the importance of this master-apprentice dynamic. The level of communication they had was beautiful. As Anakin got older, taller, and much more stronger than his master, it didn't actually change their dynamic, because Ventress was as skilled as she was. She didn't give Anakin any easy passes or breaks. She just made him work through each spar, session, and even many times he failed to even best her. Regardless, during the same time, the Senator of Naboo was dealing with a crisis of her own. She was dealing with two major events, the failed assassination attempt on her own life, and the military creation act that was being fueled by Chancellor Palpatine. Palpatine, though she was fighting this creation act mere hours after almost dying. Padme didn't take no for an answer, and she was following in her duties to the Republic, though Palpatine put the session in recess because Padme made a strong enough case to the Republic that there was no need for these weapons of mass destruction. This was an off-putting start to Palpatine's plan, and he needed her gone, so that he could force the hand of the senators to gift him the emergency powers he needed to supply this war of his. If he didn't have such emergency powers, then he could very easily be removed from office. Two Jedi were told to protect a senator from Naboo, Master Ventress and her student, Anakin Skywalker. This exchange wouldn't be painfully awkward for either party, as Anakin, learning from his master, would exchange flirts without being overbearing or too zesty to say the least. It was fulfilling for Skywalker, and it did exactly what Asajj hoped it would do. Anakin was able to alleviate most of his desires through a friendly discourse rather than a pursuit. There was a much better connection between Padme and Anakin immediately with this behavior, and it left little room for more to be desired from either party, which worked really well. Anakin and Ventress would spend the night watching guard over Padme, and eventually even saving her life from a group of deadly insects that were very poisonous, though the pursuit led them to Zam Wesell, and she was killed by the Mandalorian bounty hunter named Jango Fett. It was a dead end, and the Jedi couldn't go anywhere with the information they had. Padme tried to reason with the Chancellor about not being sent off-world, which she knew was a very political move on his part, mostly to give him the necessary reins to get the bill signed in his favor. With the support of Master Ventress, Padme would be permitted to stay on Coruscant, where she would rally the Senate to veto Palpatine's proposition and call for a treaty with the Separatists that were forming against the Republic. This would very quickly put Palpatine's plans on the back burner, though that wasn't the end of it, because Palpatine was originally going to have CIS strike a Republic planet, which would remove all need for discourse and allow the Chancellor to be gifted said emergency powers. Padme, during the Senate hearings, after getting the Senate to veto the military creation bill, would suggest a vote of no confidence to remove the ruler unfit for duty of office. This was a very hard sell for Padme. Palpatine was very popular as a politician, but she had an angle that she could legitimately work in her favor. While yes, Palpatine was popular, there was one reason she could get this vote of no confidence to work, that being that Palpatine was actively trying to promote a war, which surprisingly took the Republic Senate by storm, because the truth is most people didn't want a war, and without a great battle spurring it on, the Senate still had a chance to make amends with the systems that didn't want to be a part of the Republic. There was a chance for saving this, though slim, it was entirely redeemable. The vote of no confidence went in favor of the Republic by throwing Palpatine out of office, and in his place was the ever so likable Senator Karras from Kinyan. He was someone liked on both sides of the aisle, both Republic and Separatists, and he also would likely have a better chance of securing a deal that both sides could agree with. And as soon as Karras got into office, the droid armies attacked. Palpatine knew that if he didn't have power, then he would need to force it, and the Separatists attacked Kinyan as a way to show strength against the new Chancellor. It was a massacre, and without a feasible army, Karras did what he could to negotiate a deal, though there was one crucial issue Palpatine overlooked. It was how the Separatists would react with this kind of attack. As soon as the way began, it came crashing down, and it blew up in all their faces. With a humanitarian crisis on Kinyan, the Jedi dispatched several of its members to help pick up the pieces, while at the same time the Separatist Council was undoing everything they had worked towards, aside from the major supporters from the major corporations that were supporting the CIS. The star systems all backed out of it. The only planet that was not backing out was Sereno, and that was because of Dooku. The entire Separatist government could not condone an attack like that. The entire point of their council was to show unison against the Republic, and without the Republic starting the war on Geonosis, the council couldn't feasibly agree with an unprovoked attack on innocents. This immediately shifted the power dynamic in this government. Governments on Cato Nemodia, Molinist, and Skako Minor, to name the few, would implement the harshest tariffs and taxes on the Techno Union, the Banking Clan, and the Trade Federation to shove them out of this behavior. The death toll on Kinyan was palpable, and it was felt across the entire galaxy, and no one could stand with such decisions made by the CIS. It was all shut down immediately. Sidious, filled with rage, would take his anger out on Dooku and kill him in the process, which would leave the Sith Lord without an apprentice. His final hope was to take over the young mind of Skywalker, who had just become a Jedi Knight. Sidious would have to play this one out differently. He had the ability to use the clone army, but there was no feasible way that he could accomplish this grand plan without doing something terribly rambunctious, and even at that, he wouldn't be able to hold power for forever without a popular support, which was the entire point of his plans. So, Sidious returned to the homeworld of the Sith to focus on the dark side, tap into its powers, and use it against the Jedi in the most efficient way he could. What that was he wasn't sure yet, but that's why he was here to figure it out. Sidious would spend several years on Korriban. At the same time, young Skywalker was becoming closer with the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Both Master Yoda and Anakin Skywalker had developed a bond, especially after Yoda gave Anakin his first student in Ahsoka Tano. Asajj was proud of Anakin for taking on a student so soon after becoming a Jedi Knight, but it was never his choice. He originally resented the idea of training a Padawan, but he and Ahsoka got along incredibly well, so it worked out in everyone's favor. Though with Skywalker becoming more open to the Force around him, and Yoda seeing the flaws of the Jedi, he decided to take Skywalker on a journey with him. This would lead Yoda and Skywalker to an interaction with the Ones, incredible beings of the Force that found their home on Mortis. While on Mortis, Yoda would see and respect Skywalker for what he truly was, which was the Jedi's prophesied Chosen One. This incredible raw talent displayed by Skywalker was exactly why he was brought on the mission with him. After their detour to Mortis, the two of them would find their way to the planet of Dagobah, both of them taking a journey down inside the caves of the planet, each of them having their own respective vision. Yoda knew that these visions could very well become true, even though he didn't know what Skywalker's vision was. Yoda's vision, with him being so old, envisioned the ascension of the Jedi with the Chosen One. Though this galaxy-wide tour of Force-sensitive planets didn't stop with Dagobah. It took them to Ahch-To, and then from Ahch-To they went to the homeworld of the Sith at Korriban. The reason they came to Korriban was simply because the planet was connected to the Force, and while yes, it was very dark, it could reveal secrets about the Sith who were likely still about in the galaxy, wherever they might be. Though upon landing it felt like Yoda's search for the Sith came to an end. Skywalker wasn't aware they were looking for the Sith, he just assumed he was learning more about the Force with each planet they visited. And that was no exception here. He just assumed that the Force was calling them there for another lesson. The two of them started walking towards the massive temple. Skywalker stopped, telling Yoda that there was something bad here. The Grand Master told Anakin that the dark side would call to them, it would try to corrupt them, and it was up to them to defy their call to the dark side. They carried on, walking into the ancient Sith temple. Yoda told the Chosen One to be on his guard. Sith temples played tricks on their mind. Their entire purpose was to dissuade Jedi from their path that they were on, to push them to the brink of the dark side before whisking away the light away from them. Yoda stopped and raised his lightsaber from his belt, dropping his cane. Apparitions of Sith from long before drew their blades, as they stood holding their blades in front of their faces. From the shadows emerged a Sith that wasn't one of them. Both Anakin and Yoda ignited their lightsabers. Anakin turned to the side and saw another version of the same Sith. Yoda told Skywalker to get low. Anakin lowered his head as he crouched. The Jedi Grand Master leapt up from the ground and used the Force, sending out a massive shockwave, dispersing all the spirits and revealing one true Sith Lord. Skywalker and Yoda ignited their lightsabers and moved in together. In unison, a massive clash would begin. Sidious knew that Skywalker, while yes, was the Chosen One, was currently the weak link out of the two Jedi, so that's who he targeted. However, Anakin was prepared for everything the Dark Lord of the Sith threw at him, every parry and every block. Got Yoda one close striker to achieving the victory for the Jedi. Their duel carried on throughout the temple, and it came to a conclusion as Yoda toppled a pillar down on top of Sidious, to which Skywalker extinguished the Sith Lord with his lightsaber. Yoda and Anakin would continue on their journey and then return to Coruscant, and the whole purpose of this exercise was that once Yoda passed away, Anakin had all the necessary information to lead the Jedi Order. All the information made sense, and it would prove to be nothing but beneficial for the Jedi Order in the coming years. Until then, Anakin would bring Ahsoka Tano into the rank of Jedi Knight, and after all of his hard work, Master Skywalker would be accepted into the High Council. The Republic, on the other hand, would work to save itself. There would be skirmishes, but there would never be use for the clone army, which the Kaminoans would struggle with getting paid for creating, but they would be done their justice after several years of investigation into the truth of why the clone army was created. Though the galaxy as a whole would find peace, while bumpy, it would be much better than any alternative universe where the Sith were able to wage war on an unsuspecting galaxy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Tiger Boy, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Madman Astudas, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, and Flen Van Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit 2,000 likes on this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. Otherwise, apologies for my voice. I've got allergies right now. They are my favorite thing in the world because who loves a little bit of spring and pollen in your nostrils? I do. I'm going to talk about this story for a hot sec. This was fun. I think this was a fun story. We haven't done one of these trained videos in a while, so it was kind of fun returning to this very old classic series on the channel. But with Asajj, it was always going to be more interesting just because of the closeness and their age. And so I had a lot of fun with Asajj in this video because they, like, when I first started, like, when I first, like, had the concept appear, I forget where the concept came from. It was probably a comment section comment. But when the comment, like, when the idea first appeared, I didn't really know where I was going to go with it. And then when I finally started writing it, I was like, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to have this really cool growth here because Asajj and Anakin are basically the same person. I just didn't realize it. They're really kind of the same person. They both were slaves. They're both, you know, not really respected by the Jedi. Asajj never really got a chance to be inside the Jedi Order, but I'm suspecting that if she was, in the case of this story, she would be treated she wouldn't be treated equally, obviously. Now, there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen in the beginning of the story for this to even work, and so that's why the first part of the story isn't really about her. It's more about, you know, why Plo Koon picked Obi Wan, and why, you know, why Asajj Ventress wasn't raised on Ratak, and why she was brought to the temple instead of being on Ratak instead, you know? And so that whole dynamic shift was very, you know, was important and crucial to the story. However, I think having having Asajj be the character she is would be actually a really perfect Jedi Master for Anakin, just because that's who she is. I made a Marvel reference because I just couldn't help but I feel like if anyone was going to say it, if anyone's going to say that Obi-Wan had what in Star Wars would essentially be America's ass, I feel like that would be Asajj. I don't know why. I just feel like that's a very Asajj thing to say, saying that, you know, Obi-Wan has Coruscant's ass. I felt that was a nice comedic relief moment that didn't take too much away from the story, but actually fit into the confines of what I was trying to say and talk about. And that whole flirtatious thing going on with Obi-Wan and Asajj Ventress, I'm sure that would continue as Jedi. And so, again, it adds to that extra layer of what can be done for Anakin in this scenario. And I think them having like this almost older sister vibe. Obviously, I don't think Asajj would look at Anakin like a younger brother, but I think Anakin viewing Asajj as an older sister would kind of create this really nice dynamic for the two of them. But yeah, this was fun. I hope you all enjoyed it. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.